Shadows are a mechanic in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game that frankly are not explained very well. So today I wanted to bring you this short guide that's going to explain everything there is to know about the Shadows mechanic in TCM. I'm sure some of you are also wondering what Grandpa's level 4 detection in Shadows ability means, and we'll be covering that in this guide as well. Trust me when I say this mechanic is a lot more complicated than just standing in the dark, and it can have some serious gameplay implications. Before we jump in, consider dropping a like or subscribing if you find today's video helpful, and also come say hey on one of our Twitch live streams, link in the description. But let's dive right in. Firstly, we need to cover what shadows are so that you can utilize them most effectively. Shadows are a visual and gameplay effect in Texas Chainsaw that allow victims to remain stealthy and gain some added buffs while doing so. Traditionally, to gain the shadows effect, you'll need to enter a very dark area of the map. If you've ever noticed those lights that you can interact with as a family member or victim, you've probably noticed that they're typically lighting very dark areas. By simply turning off a light and entering one of these dark areas, you'll be granted the shadows effect. This effect is not exclusive to those gloomy spots, but can also be used in areas with lots of foliage, but we're going to go into depth on that in just a moment, so hang tight. It should be noted that you can use an unlock tool to trap interactable lights, so that if a family member interacts with the light source, it will blow out, leaving the light permanently broken and the family member stunned for a few seconds. Trapping a light will not consume your unlock tool. Also, there are dark areas existing within the game that are not connected to interactable light sources and will still provide the shadows buff. You'll know you've, quote, entered shadows when your victim gains this gray tint over them. It can be quite difficult to see at times, but it gets easier to make out once you know what you're looking for. You'll notice in this side-by-side example that our victim on the left has their traditional color grading, and in general, they stand out just a bit more. If you take a look on the right, you'll notice that our victims look much darker and have this gray tint and outline to their model. This gray coloring means that you have entered the shadows and have been granted some additional buffs. So what are the buffs that you gain when you enter shadows? Well, for starters, it will be more difficult for family members to spot you if they aren't looking quite so closely. This isn't that impactful of a buff, but it has saved me in a few very important instances, like the one on screen now. When in shadows, you'll also gain immunity to Grandpa's radar. What this means is that during Grandpa's howl or scream, you can move around while remaining undetected with your aura hidden, as seen in this clip here. Pretty neat, right? If you move out of the shadows, you will be detected until re-entering them once again. Now, you're probably thinking that this is a cool little feature, but it doesn't have much practical gameplay usage, considering you're not typically hiding in dark corners. And that's where Shadows in Foliage comes into play. If you ever find yourself in an area that has lots of bushes or other types of vegetation, you might notice that your character has this gray tint on them, which means you've once again entered the shadows. You'll be harder to spot, and you can actively move around in the foliage while Grandpa is using his sonar ability. I've actually had the visibility buff save me quite a few times from family members who were looking closely for me, and there are some locations as seen on screen right now where you can make yourself almost completely invisible with how dark your character appears. It can also save you in a few select situations if you need to move away from a family member who's looking around in an area while Grandpa's howling away. Also, please note that you do need to be crouched in order to make the shadows effect work properly. Now, this brings us to our next topic of discussion, and that's Grandpa's level 4 ability. You've probably noticed that once Grandpa reaches level 4, a message comes across the top of the screen reading Grandpa's power increased, detection in shadows active. All this means is that even if you are hidden in the shadows, Grandpa will be able to detect you if you move. So essentially, the game just nullifies the hidden aura effect in shadows while moving once Grandpa reaches level 4. You can still gain the visual color buff, but nothing more. Also, if you have any lingering questions about Grandpa and his abilities, feel free to check out this complete Grandpa guide we did on the channel. I'll leave a card on screen and a link in the description. So shadows are a mechanic in TCM that aren't really understood by a lot of players due to the lack of explanation they've been given. They can really come in handy in a lot of situations and give you an extra edge against the family in terms of stealth. But this about wraps up our complete guide on shadows. If you learned something today, feel free to drop a like or subscribe, as it helps me to continue making this content. We'll be bringing you more Texas Chainsaw guides in the future, and please let me know in the comments what other TCM videos you'd like to see. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.